talk about timing. The public policy polling outfit from Raleigh, North Carolina, which is a Democratic-leaning polling group, released last week a survey that showed the U.S. Senate race between Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen and former Massachusetts Senator Republican Scott Brown is a dead heat, 46 to 43. Why does that matter? It matters a lot, because Scott Brown is right now trying to decide, since he's become a resident of Rye only a few weeks ago, whether he's going to enter this race. That was the good news for Scott Brown in this poll. There was some not such good news in that same survey. It said among Republican primary voters, Scott Brown's support for an assault weapons ban, Scott Brown's support for Roe versus Wade that legalized abortion, and Scott Brown's short-term residency in New Hampshire are all problems for him as he tries to navigate a Republican primary that likely is going to include former U.S. Senator Bob Smith, former State Senator Jim Rubins, Franklin conservative activist Karen Testerman, and gadfly Andy Martin. So Scott Brown has his own problems winning this primary, but it shows that he'd be the strongest candidate going forward. And as Scott Brown decides to run, I think what he's looking at is not PPP polls, but Republican polling, which I think will be done for him, either by the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee or some of these PACs that have been spending more than $700,000 in attack ads against Jeanne Shaheen. That's the good news for Senator Shaheen, which is her favorability in the state remains pretty solid, and most importantly, well above President Barack Obama, despite a lot of these attack ads. That means she's weathering this storm, and that's important for an incumbent. But any incumbent, Democrat or Republican, at this stage, who's under 50% in any race against any potential challenger, could be vulnerable. But we saw last week also, Senator Jeanne Shaheen is well aware of that. That's why she's raised $5.8 million for her reelection. That's why she has more than $3 million in the bank. She's well funded. Scott Brown can compete with her on fundraising, and I think is the only Republican who probably would be able to do that. That's the other reason there's a lot of appeal for Scott Brown getting into this race. We don't know whether he will or not, but in some ways he's almost backed himself into the corner. Almost 20 trips to the state. Can he now back out of this race after having sort of not toyed with Republican activists, but certainly gotten them very interested in the prospect of a campaign? We'll follow all of that for you in this interesting 2014 election cycle